happens?
Well, I look at it more in conventional terms because there are other powers in the world that are coming up, particularly China, but you also have Russia, you even have India and Japan. But particularly China, I think, in my opinion, and my theory, is probably the motivation for the Space Force. Because, there's been a lot of talk about the electromagnetic pulse and all that, but if certain satellites were knocked out of our system, we could have serious problems. And there's also, there's a line of thinking that the Chinese have designs on the moon. And I think even Robert Bigelow has mentioned that. So possibly there's some concern about the Chinese coming up in their space program in a way that can truly compete with us in a way that could affect what we see as being our long-term interests. And that, in my humble opinion, is the motivation for the Space Force.
Yeah, you probably hit that on the nail head too. But I can't understand. We're talking about going to Mars, and to me that don't make logical sense. We should first even think about before going to Mars. We should go back to the moon and create some type of camp, a base on the moon, and see how the humans can survive on the moon before we even think about the one-way trip going to Mars.
Yeah, I mean, I don't want to rain on people's parade because I was a kid once, and I fantasized about space travel, and I thought it was so wonderful, the possibility of going to other planets. But I'll tell you, common sense tells me that traveling to Mars, that humans traveling to Mars is totally impractical for several reasons. First reason, it takes I don't know how many months to get there. So these people are going to be cooped up in a spacecraft just to get to Mars. Once they get there, they'll be lucky if they can be living in a unit that's as big as a large trailer, okay? And they're going to be cooped up in there. I'd go nuts, and I think people will go nuts, and it's a one-way trip. There's very little possibility that we'd have the capability to get those people to come back, and if they did, it would take months and months to get them back to Earth. So I just don't see the whole manned Mars mission with current technology and current propulsion as being practical.
Well, unless we have other technology that will all of a sudden start filtering out in the next few years. But, I can't see it. I just can't. And I keep thinking the last time we were on the moon, when we had, the astronauts say, look over there, those huge ships, and talk about alien craft. That makes me wonder, is there stuff on the moon, maybe on the backside of the moon, that we can't see, that they're hiding from us?
Well, there was a story by a gentleman, I'm sorry I can't remember his name at the moment, but I met him at a MUFON symposium, and myself and other board members had a talk with him, and his Carl Wolf, I believe is his name, and he just recently passed away a few months ago. But his story was that he went into a facility in the Washington, D.C. area to repair a printer, and it was at a time when they had a lunar orbiter, orbiting the moon, unmanned. And he was told in the room that he went into, which was either directly connected with the NSA or part of the NSA, he was told by the person in that room that they had picked up a base on the far side of the moon. Now, this is before, we ever had a manned mission there. Now, that's his story. So, is it true? Is it false? Is there any legitimacy to it? I don't know, but it's a possibility.
Well, I think about that quite seriously because, like I said, the astronaut talking about, these spacecraft, on the other side of the crater, that weren't man-made and huge, makes me wonder, did we stumble on something? Were we told we couldn't go back to the moon? I don't know. That's what I can't understand. Why, again, would we want to bypass the moon and jump to Mars? And with our technology, you're right. Our technology isn't there to safely get somebody to Mars or a group of people to Mars. Then, what's their survival rate going to be? weeks, months, years. I think they'll be long dead before they go crazy. And then you have these crazy scientists talking about, well, maybe we should detonate a nuclear bomb on Mars and melt the ice caps. And then you get another group of scientists say, you can't do that because that is going to irradiate the water it forms from the ice. Then you have another group of scientists say, you can't do that because when the ice all melts, the atmosphere is so thin of Mars, it's all going to evaporate. I mean, the stuff they're talking about is so crazy.
I agree, and this whole business of this idea of terraforming Mars, I think, is the biggest load of nonsense I've ever heard. And I'll tell you why. Have we screwed up the Earth yet? I mean, we're messing up the Earth big time. So we're going to go to another planet and screw that up too? That doesn't make any sense. So I don't agree with this whole idea of terraforming, and I think it's a long shot at best, and I think it's a lot of wishful thinking.
Well, maybe we ought to look at doing it on our own planet, the rate it's going. That's what scares me. You know, again, if we are being visited by whoever from out there, and they're here to serve man and help man, I don't think our ice caps or, Antarctica would be melting. We wouldn't have temperatures of 97 degrees in Alaska. Greenland wouldn't, lose all their last of their ice. Something is going on. And if they were here to serve man and help people, I don't think this would be going on. I mean, let's face it, I wouldn't want to buy any property on the East Coast right now unless I had a nice big ship to park, as a houseboat.
Yeah, well, I hope it doesn't come up to my apartment.
I don't know. I have a friend that lives in Florida, and he said that, every day the tide is coming up the main street. Water is gushing out of the manholes. So, I mean, that tells you the water is slowly creeping in. I don't know. I get all these people that claim that they are being abducted. And what's scary is I believe a lot of these people, like Calvin Parker, Timothy Collin. I've had all these people that either been implanted or abducted. And one question I always ask them, I said, do you think these aliens, that abducted you are here to help mankind? Or do you feel they're evil? And you know what I hear? I hear 90% of the time, the word evil.
Uh-huh. Well, and if you read Derek Tyler's book or listen to Derek Tyler, he's definitely of that opinion. And there are a couple of schools that thought about that. But like I said, Gary, I think there are several groups, at a minimum, several groups that are involved in this. And they may vary, in their motivations or in their attitudes toward us. I think, some of it may be evil and some of it may be neutral and some of it may be somewhat benevolent. But there hasn't been any overt effort by any of these groups to directly help us that I know of.
No, that's what scares me. And then I don't know if you ever heard of Mary Joyce. She runs you have Peter Davenport with the UFO Reporting Center. She has something in Cashiers, North Carolina. They, keep track of UFOs and some cryptics and stuff like that. She said she had an ex-government source or a government source come up to her a couple years ago and claimed that the huge underground base in North Carolina, that there's aliens giving technology to the military and sharing information to the technology, but claims that these are not the type of aliens you'd want to meet at night. Not the type you'd want to invite over for a barbecue. Otherwise, you might be the what's on the barbecue. And these supposed to be working with the government. You read that, you see all this information coming out. That's where I get so confused. For every good piece of information you think is coming out, there's that disinformation coming out. And I think a lot of it is coming from the government source, just to keep us confused. I think for everything they want to share to us, they want us to stay confused.
Well, I think that's a distinct possibility, and I know I feel that way a lot, Gary. I think a lot of us in the UFO community, it's gotten to the point to where we don't know what to believe. We're not sure what to believe, but for a long time, and I've been directly involved in this field since the early 90s, so I've been around a little while. I try to have the attitude, keep an open mind, but take everything with a grain of salt. And I do the same thing even with the regular news that I hear every day, because you hear this and they say this and they say that, and I don't have the time to investigate and research it all. And a lot of times, if you do research it, you find out that they've omitted certain facts, or that the facts are different than what they put forward, and the story is different. So, we hear all of these things. I try to keep an open mind, because I do believe that we're being visited, and I do believe that it's a real phenomenon. And like I said, I believe that there are probably several groups involved, at least several groups, and their attitude toward us can vary from being what we consider to be pure evil to maybe somewhat benevolent. But all in between that, I think we just have to keep an open mind and take it with a grain of salt.
Well, I think that's all you can. Now, going back to Roswell, the government, the military announced that they had the remains of a crashed UFO and alien bodies. Now, I don't believe that you would have somebody in the military announce that from the base, the chief communication officer, come out and say that, and then the next morning say it was a weather balloon. But meanwhile, they sent out the troops to go out and recover every little piece they can find of the crash at the crash site. But then on top of it, the rumors are they went to the town, to the sheriff, to the fire department, to people on their doors knocking, and basically telling them, you didn't see anything, you didn't hear anything. It makes me wonder why would they go around and do that if that was a weather balloon?
Oh yeah, and I mean, I'm almost 100% convinced that the Roswell incident was some kind of an anomalous event. And even Kevin Randall, who's an extremely conservative UFO investigator and researcher, in his book Roswell in the 21st Century, he went back and treated Roswell as a cold case, and in being an honest investigator, he realized that some of the things that they thought were strong elements of the case didn't turn out to be so strong. But even after him eliminating some of this information, there's still enough left to convince me that something really happened. Well, and there have been persistent rumors over the years of scientists, studying bodies, and scientists studying craft, and people seeing UFOs and saucers and hangars and so on and so forth. So I'm personally, and it's just my opinion, I don't have proof, but I'm inclined to believe that it was an alien craft, and that there were bodies involved, and that the government has been involved in this.
Well,
the problem is we don't have proof.
That's the whole thing, and that's why they immediately went out and started doing disinformation the next day. But, again, if you study Roswell, you realize a weather balloon couldn't have plow the earth like what was seen in the photographs of Roswell, supposedly, of the crash site. There also is that there was radar at that area working, which could have caused some problem with the UFO to crash. So, I mean, you take all this consideration in, and it makes your mind wonder, something happened, and maybe we don't know exactly what, but I can tell you this, it was no way it was a weather balloon. I can say that much.
Well, and that approach that they took really was repeated time and again in the 50s and 60s. And, most UFO reports are prosaic. They can be explained. But there are lots of good UFO reports and UFO experiences. And the Air Force at the time always had an explanation. They always explained it away. It was Venus, it was the moon, it was
swamp gas,
sundog, it was swamp gas, whatever. And this is their approach, because they were trying to keep the public at bay and keep people from getting too involved in it, and keeping the public pressure off. And I think to a large extent it was a tactic to control the media narrative, so that the media didn't get on their case.
I think